Speak English. The man's voice, grating as burnt coffee, made her flinch. He waved a dismissive hand. Rainwater beaded on her elegant, if soaked, beige trench. Panic bloomed in her cornflower blue eyes. Amelia's gut twisted. Not another oblivious jerk. This tourist was terrified. Months of soul-crushing shifts, bills stacked like accusations, and Leo's rasping cough faded. Something else sparked. She knew what it was to be unseen, useless, alone. She stepped forward, a phrase dredged from a long-dead dream on her tongue. They all saw a lowly waitress, maybe an easy mark. Oh, they had no idea how her quiet kindness would change everything. A tidal wave was coming, a black wave in a limousine. Speak English! The man's voice, grating as burnt coffee, made her flinch. He waved a dismissive hand. Rainwater beaded on her elegant, if soaked, beige trench. Panic bloomed in her cornflower blue eyes. Amelia's gut twisted. Not another oblivious jerk. This tourist was terrified. Months of soul-crushing shifts, bills stacked like accusations, and Leo's rasping cough faded. Something else sparked. She knew what it was to be unseen, useless, alone. She stepped forward, a phrase dredged from a long-dead dream on her tongue. They all saw a lowly waitress, maybe an easy mark. Oh, they had no idea how her quiet kindness would change everything. A tidal wave was coming, a black wave in a limousine. The Daily Grind Cafe reeked of desperation disguised as dark roast. Each morning, Amelia battled the existential dread brewing in her chest alongside the bitter espresso. At 24, her life wasn't a tapestry of sunlit art galleries and sophisticated openings as she'd once envisioned. Instead, it was a relentless cycle of lukewarm coffee, impatient demands, and the oppressive weight of her brother Leo's illness. Her art history degree, purchased with $70,000 in student loans, was now just a fancy piece of paper gathering dust in a drawer. The cafe was a symphony of minor irritations. Mr. Henderson, her manager, a man whose Napoleon complex manifested in tyrannical pronouncements about microscopic smudges on saucers, made her life a daily exercise in stifled frustration. Tips were dismal, barely enough to cover the cost of a decent lunch, let alone the mountain of debt that threatened to bury her. But the real monster lurked not in the form of overdue notices or demanding customers. It lived in the sterile, brightly lit aisles of the pharmacy. Leo, 16 and fiercely intelligent, was slowly being devoured by a rare autoimmune disorder. His wit was as sharp as ever, but his body was failing him. The medications that kept him alive were prohibitively expensive, and Amelia felt like she was bleeding out with every refill. The pharmacist's last call had been a death knell. Without payment, the life-saving drugs would be withheld. That Tuesday, a relentless rain hammered against the cafe windows, mirroring the storm raging inside her. Henderson had already launched into a tirade about the unacceptable quality of the silverware, threatening to dock her already meager wages. Every interaction felt like a fresh wound. It was during the lull after the lunch rush, as Amelia wiped down a sticky table, that the bell above the door jingled, announcing the arrival of the soaked tourist. The elderly woman stood just inside the doorway, a beacon of elegant desperation. Her beige trench coat dripped rainwater onto the linoleum floor. Cornflower blue eyes, wide with terror, darted around the cafe. A simple pearl necklace adorned her neck, a stark contrast to the panic etched on her face. She approached the counter, where Henderson was busy counting the day's receipts. A torrent of rapid-fire French tumbled from her lips. "Excusez-moi, Vir, sac?" Henderson's face contorted in annoyance. "Speak English," he snapped, waving his hand dismissively. The woman flinched, her panic intensifying. She gestured to her empty hands, then to her pockets, the French words pouring out in a desperate stream. "Monsac, Montillon, l'Hôtel." "I don't have time for this," Henderson muttered, turning away. Chloe, the other waitress, feigned an intense fascination with the coffee grinder, actively avoiding eye contact. The remaining customers looked on with a mixture of pity and impatience. The old woman looked on the verge of tears, and that's when something shifted inside Amelia. Under the layers of exhaustion and despair, a spark of something resembling hope flickered to life. She didn't just see a lost tourist. She saw a grandmother, a human being terrified and alone. She put down her rag, took a breath, and stepped forward. Je peux vous aider, madame, Amelia said softly, the French words rusty but clear. I can help you, madam. I speak a little French. The elderly woman's head snapped towards her, her eyes locking onto Amelia's. For the first time since she had walked in, a flicker of hope broke through the panic. The French felt clumsy, dredged up from a past that felt like a dream. Remnants of a scholarship year in Lyon, a time of art history and youthful optimism, now buried beneath debt and despair. Vraiment, the woman whispered, her voice thick with relief. Really? Oui, Amelia confirmed, offering a reassuring smile. She led the woman away from the judgmental glare of the counter to a small, secluded table in the corner. Tell me what happened. From behind the counter, Henderson's voice lashed out. Vance, table 7 needs their check. What do you think you're doing? Just a moment, Mr. Henderson. She's very distressed, Amelia called back, her voice firmer than she expected. She turned back to the woman, ignoring her manager's indignant huff. The woman, who introduced herself as Genevieve, explained her predicament in frantic sentences. She had been returning to her hotel from a museum when she realized her handbag, a gift from her late husband, was gone. Inside was everything: her wallet, identification, phone, and the card with her hotel address. She remembered the museum, the Galerie d'Art Moderne, but had no idea how to get back, or even the name of her hotel, only that it was luxurious and near Tronacourt. Amelia listened patiently, piecing together the story. The city had dozens of luxurious hotels. Calling the police was the logical next step, but Genevieve needed a moment of calm, a human connection. D'accord, Amelia said, her tone soothing. First, let's get you something warm to drink. Genevieve shook her head, her hands trembling. Non, non, je ne peux pas. I have no money. C'est moi qui paye, Amelia insisted. It's on me. She went to the counter. 1 chamomile tea and a croissant, please, Chloe. Chloe glanced nervously toward Henderson's office. He'll kill you. You know we can't give stuff away. Just put it on my tab, Amelia said, knowing her tab was already a black hole against her next paycheck. She brought the tea and pastry to the table. Genevieve looked at the offering as if it were a feast. She took a sip of the tea, gratitude washing over her features. You are so kind, Genevieve said in French, her eyes welling. Everyone was just looking through me. People are in a hurry, Amelia replied gently. Now let's think. Your hotel. Do you remember anything else? A name? A landmark? Genevieve squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating. There was a statue, a man on a horse, in a grand plaza, and the name, Devo. I think the name Devo was involved. My grandson, his name, Julian Devo. He is supposed to meet me for dinner. He will be so worried. He is very protective. Amelia's mind raced. Julian Devo. She pulled out her phone, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, and typed the name into the search bar. The results hit her with the force of a physical blow. The screen filled with photos of a man with intense dark eyes and a chiseled jaw stepping out of private jets, cutting ribbons on skyscrapers, standing beside world leaders. Headlines screamed wealth and power. Julian Devo, CEO of Devo Holdings, expands global empire. Billionaire philanthropist pledges millions to Arts Foundation. The enigmatic life of the Devo heir. This wasn't just a lost tourist. This was the grandmother of one of the richest, most powerful men in the country. Vance, my office, now! Henderson's voice boomed. Amelia looked from the phone screen to the frail woman sipping her tea, and then to her manager's thunderous face. Her stomach twisted. She knew her act of kindness was about to come at a high price. Amelia took a steadying breath and squeezed Genevieve's hand. Tout ira bien, she whispered before turning to face her boss. The walk to Henderson's windowless office felt like a march to the gallows. The air inside smelled of stale paperwork and microwave soup. He didn't offer her a chair. He stood arms crossed, his face flushed with anger. 45 minutes, he began, his voice low and seething. You spent 45 minutes of company time coddling some tourist who probably wandered out of the Four Seasons without her nanny. And I saw you give her a tea and a croissant. Did you ring that up, Vance? I was going to pay for it myself, Amelia said, her voice quiet. The woman was in hysterics. She's lost everything. Her purse, her phone. She doesn't speak English. That is not our problem. Henderson slammed his hand on the desk. Our problem is selling coffee, serving customers who actually pay. While you were playing United Nations translator, Table 4 left without tipping because their cups were empty. You are here to make me money, not to run a charity. She needed help, Amelia insisted, a spark of defiance igniting within her. No one else was willing to do it. Because everyone else understands what a job is, he sneered. It's about productivity, efficiency, not holding some rich old lady's hand. For all you know, it's a scam. She probably does this every day to get a free lunch. The accusation was vile, a slap in the face of the genuine fear she'd seen in Genevieve's eyes. Amelia couldn't stop the words escaping. That's a horrible thing to say. She is a person, Mr. Henderson, not a line item on your balance sheet. Henderson's eyes narrowed to slits. You've got a real attitude problem, Vance. You think because you went to some fancy college, you're better than this job. Well, you're not. You're just a waitress, and right now you're a terrible one. He leaned across the desk, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You are on your final warning. Get back out there. Give that woman a map and point her to the door. I don't want to see her here when I come out in 5 minutes. Understood? Amelia stood frozen, the injustice choking her. She wanted to scream, to tell him what he could do with his miserable job. But the image of Leo's pale face flashed in her mind. She couldn't afford to be fired. Swallowing her pride, she gave a curt nod. Understood. She walked back into the cafe, her heart pounding with anger and shame. Genevieve looked up, her eyes wide with concern. Is everything all right, my dear? She asked in French. Amelia forced a smile. Everything is fine, she lied. Now let's figure this out. She knew she couldn't call Devo Holdings from her phone with Henderson breathing down her neck. Her next move had to be decisive. She needed to get Genevieve to a safe place. A taxi was the only option. She looked in her worn purse, pulling out her wallet. Inside was a $10 bill and a few crumpled ones. Her tips from the entire day, her bus fare for the rest of the week, her lunch money. Without hesitation, she folded the bills into a neat square. Madam, she began, switching back to French, I cannot reach your grandson from here, but I know of a very reputable and safe hotel not far from here. The Grand Majestic. It's on the same plaza as the statue you mentioned. I am certain they will be able to help you contact your family. A taxi can take you there directly. She pressed the money into Genevieve's hand. The older woman looked at the crumpled wad of cash, then back at Amelia, her eyes shining. No, my child, I cannot take your money. You have done too much already. Please, Amelia insisted, closing Genevieve's fingers over the bills. It is the fastest way. Your grandson is waiting. That is the most important thing. Just tell the driver, the Grand Majestic Hotel. They will understand. She helped the frail woman to her feet and walked her to the door, pulling up the collar of her thin jacket against the relentless rain. She flagged down a passing yellow cab, the water soaking her hair. She opened the taxi door and helped Genevieve inside, making sure she was settled. The Grand Majestic Hotel, please, Amelia told the driver clearly. Genevieve reached from the back seat, her hand surprisingly strong as it clasped Amelia's. I do not know how to thank you. You are an angel. What is your name, my dear? Amelia. Amelia Vance. Amelia, Genevieve repeated, her voice full of emotion. I will not forget this. I will not forget you. Amelia watched the taxi pull away, its red tail lights disappearing into the gray, rainy street. A sense of relief washed over her, followed by a cold, hard dread. She turned to see Mr. Henderson standing in the doorway of the cafe, arms crossed, a smug, cruel smile plastered on his face. He had seen the entire exchange, including the money, and in his eyes she saw not the end of a shift, but the end of her job. So not only did you waste an hour of company time, give away company product, but now I see you passing cash to strangers? Henderson said, dripping with mock disbelief. What is this? The Amelia Vance Foundation for Bewildered Tourists? I gave her my own money, Amelia shot back, her resolve hardening. The fear was still there, overlaid with defiant anger. It was my tip money for a cab. Your tips, Henderson scoffed. Tips you earn on my property, in my establishment, and you've just proven you're not only an inefficient employee, but a liability. What if she was a con artist? What if she sues the cafe for some perceived slight? You showed a staggering lack of judgment. He didn't need to say the words. She knew what was coming. It hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Get your things, Vance, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. You're fired. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. The words hit her, but she felt strangely numb. The moment she dreaded for months was finally here, and a bizarre calm settled over her. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She simply turned, walked to the staff locker room, gathered her meager belongings, her purse, cracked phone, and a worn copy of A History of Impressionism. As she walked out, Chloe shot her a sympathetic, helpless look. Amelia just nodded, then stepped into the deluge. The rain, a backdrop to her miserable day, now became the main event. It plastered her jacket to her skin, sending shivers down her spine. She couldn't afford a cab, and she'd given away her bus fare. Her apartment was 40 blocks away, so she walked. Each step was heavy with the weight of her failure. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked curtain of her vision. The sounds of traffic seemed distant, as if she were walking through a dream. Her world had shrunk to the rhythmic slap of her worn sneakers on the wet pavement and the frantic, looping thoughts in her head. Fired. The word echoed with the finality of a slammed door. Fired from a job she hated but desperately needed. How would she pay rent? How would she buy groceries? Leo. His name was a physical pain, the pharmacy, the medication. She had failed him, the one person she had sworn to protect. She thought of their parents, lost in a car crash 3 years ago, and the promise she had made to her 16-year-old self at their funeral, that she would always take care of Leo. The memory was so vivid it brought hot tears to her eyes, mingling with the cold rain. She passed the glittering storefronts of the upscale district where Genevieve's hotel was probably located. Mannequins in designer clothes stared out with blank, indifferent eyes. Warm light spilled from fancy restaurants where people laughed and drank wine, oblivious to the storm and the invisible girl walking past. She felt like a ghost haunting the edges of a world she could see, but never touch. Had she done the right thing? Every sensible part of her screamed, no. She should have kept her head down, served the coffee, taken the abuse. It was the price of survival. But the image of Genevieve's terrified face wouldn't leave her. In that moment, helping her had felt like the only human thing to do. She had chosen compassion over caution, and now she was paying the price. By the time she reached her run-down apartment building, she was soaked and shivering. The lobby smelled of damp carpet and boiled cabbage. She trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, her legs aching, her spirit crushed. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The stack of red envelopes on the counter seemed to mock her, their bold letters screaming her failure. She dropped her purse and book on the floor, the sound echoing in the silent room. She sank onto the lumpy sofa, the wet fabric clinging to her. She didn't have the energy to change. She just sat there, dripping onto the worn cushions, staring at nothing. The city's gray light filtered through the window, casting long shadows. This was it. Rock bottom. Jobless, broke, and about to be unable to care for her brother. The hope she'd clung to had been extinguished by the miserable rain. She closed her eyes, a desolate thought consuming her. What am I going to do now? And as she sat there, she heard a sound from the street, a sound so out of place in her neighborhood that she thought she was hallucinating. It was the low, powerful purr of a luxury engine. Amelia ignored it, dismissing it as a car passing through, but the purr didn't fade. It stopped, idling directly in front of her building. Curiosity, a ghost of an emotion, pricked at her. She dragged herself off the sofa and peered through the grimy window pane, wiping away condensation. What she saw made her blink. Parked at the curb, taking up 2 spots, was a car that didn't belong in her universe. A long, impossibly sleek, jet black sedan. Not just a nice car, a statement. The paint gleamed like polished obsidian, the chrome accents catching the light. She recognized the emblem. A Mercedes Maybach, a car that cost more than her building. It had to be lost. Then the passenger door opened. A man emerged holding a black umbrella. Tall and impeccably dressed in a chauffeur's uniform, complete with a cap and leather gloves. He moved with unhurried grace as out of place as the car. He didn't look lost. He looked like he had arrived. He walked to the entrance of her building, his shoes clicking on the wet pavement, and disappeared inside. Amelia's heart began to beat with a frantic, uneven rhythm. This couldn't be a coincidence. Who would he be visiting? The elderly Mr. Gable in 2A? The young couple with the crying baby in 3C? No one in this building commanded the attention of a Maybach and a chauffeur. Her breath hitched. A moment later, a firm, polite knock echoed on her apartment door. Uneven rhythm. This couldn't be a coincidence. Who would he be visiting the elderly Mr. Gable in 2A? The young couple with the crying baby in 3C? No one in this building commanded the attention of a Maybach and a private chauffeur. A moment later, a firm, polite knock echoed on her apartment door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was so sharp and clear in the quiet of her apartment that she physically flinched. 1,000 wild thoughts raced through her mind. Was it the landlord coming with a fancy eviction notice? Was it some kind of mistake or a darker thought surfaced? Was it related to her debts? A collector so intimidating they sent a limousine? She stood frozen in the middle of her living room, water dripping from her hair onto the floorboards. The knock came again, just as polite, just as insistent. Summoning a courage she didn't know she possessed, she walked to the door. Her hand trembled as she turned the deadbolt. She opened at a crack, the safety chain still engaged. The chauffeur stood in the dingy hallway, the umbrella now closed and held neatly at his side. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with graying temples and a face that was professional and impassive. "Miss Amelia Vance," he asked. His voice was a calm, cultured baritone, completely at odds with the peeling paint and flickering fluorescent light of the hallway. Amelia's throat was dry. "Yes," she stammered. "Who's asking?" The man gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "My name is Arthur Davis. I have been sent by Mr. Julian Dero. He requests the pleasure of your company. He wishes to thank you personally." The name hit her like a jolt of electricity. Julian Devo, the billionaire. Janov's grandson. It was real. Janov had made it to the hotel. She had told him. Amelia's mind was a maelstrom of confusion. Thank me for what? How did you even find me? Mrs. Dubois was most insistent. Mr. Davies explained, his expression unchanging. She described you in the cafe in great detail. Mr. Devo's associates are very resourceful. He is waiting for you now. If you'll be so kind as to gather your things. I am to escort you to his estate. His estate? The words sounded like something from a novel. Amelia looked down at her soaked, shabby clothes at the puddle forming around her feet. She thought of her messy apartment, the stack of bills on the counter. The idea of her Amelia Vance being escorted to a billionaire's estate was so ludicrous, so utterly beyond the realm of possibility that she almost laughed. There must be a mistake," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I can't look at me. I'm a mess." For the first time, a flicker of something human, something akin to sympathy crossed the chauffeur's face. "Mr. Devo was very clear, Miss Vance. He said, and I quote, 'Tell her it is a matter of the utmost importance, and tell her not to worry about her attire. We are not concerned with appearances.' He was waiting. The Maybach was waiting. Julian Deo was waiting. This was happening. Amelia felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if the floor had tilted beneath her. Just an hour ago, she had been at the absolute nadir of her life, jobless and hopeless. Now a black lacquer wave of impossible fortune had washed up on her shores. She didn't know if it was here to save her or to pull her under. Taking a leap of faith into the vast, terrifying unknown, she unlatched the chain. "Please," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "give me 5 minutes." The 5 minutes Amelia requested stretched into a frantic 10. She peeled off her wet clothes, her mind numb with shock. What does one wear to meet a billionaire? Her wardrobe consisted of worn-out jeans, faded t-shirts, and two slightly less worn blouses reserved for job interviews that never panned out. She chose the best of the lot, a simple pair of dark jeans and a plain navy blue sweater. She ran a brush through her damp hair, tying it back in a simple ponytail, and stared at her reflection. The same tortured, pale face stared back, but her eyes held a new emotion, a wild, terrified bewilderment. When she emerged from her apartment, Mr. Davies was waiting patiently. He gave her a slight nod of approval and led the way downstairs. As they stepped out of the building, he opened the large umbrella, shielding her from the now gentle drizzle. He opened the rear door of the Maybach and Amelia slid inside. The world outside vanished. The door closed with a soft, satisfying thump, sealing her in a cocoon of absolute silence and luxury. The scent of rich, supple leather and polished wood filled the air. The seats were plush, cream-colored leather, softer than anything she had ever touched. The ambient lighting was low and warm, and a small refrigerated compartment between the seats held bottles of what looked like very expensive water. It was less a car and more a private jet cabin on wheels. The contrast between this opulent interior and the life she had just left behind in her dingy apartment was so stark it made her feel dizzy. Mr. Davies got into the driver's seat and the car pulled away from the curb with a silent, effortless grace. She watched her graffiti-scarred neighborhood slide past the tinted windows, feeling like she was looking at it from a different planet. The journey was a silent transition between worlds. They moved from her neglected part of the city through the bustling commercial district and then into an area she had only ever seen in magazines. The streets grew wider, the trees taller, the houses larger until they weren't houses anymore, but gated mansions set far back from the road behind walls of stone and ivy. Finally, they turned onto a long private drive flanked by ancient oak trees. The drive wound its way through acres of perfectly manicured lawns before circling a grand fountain. Ahead of them loomed the Devo estate. It wasn't a house. It was a palace, a sprawling stone manor of Georgian design, with dozens of windows blazing with warm, welcoming light against the dark, rainy evening. It looked like it had been standing there for centuries, a monument to old money and enduring power. Mr. Davies brought the car to a smooth stop under a grand portico. As soon as he did, the massive oak front doors opened, and a man in a tailored black suit stepped out. He wasn't a butler. He looked younger, more like an executive assistant with a sharp, intelligent face. "Miss Vance," he said, his tone polite but businesslike as Mr. Davies opened her door. "Welcome. My name is Robert Prescott. I am Mr. Devo's chief of staff. He is waiting for you in the library. Please follow me." Amelia followed him through the doors into a cavernous two-story foyer with a marble floor and a sweeping double staircase. A breathtaking crystal chandelier hung from the coffered ceiling, casting a dazzling light over everything. Priceless-looking paintings in ornate gold frames adorned the walls. Every surface gleamed. It was more magnificent than any museum she had ever visited. She felt small and utterly out of place, her worn-out boots squeaking faintly on the polished marble. Prescott led her down a long, quiet hallway and stopped before a pair of tall, carved mahogany doors. He knocked once, then opened them. "Miss Vance has arrived, sir." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Amelia took a hesitant step across the threshold and into the library. The room was vast and majestic. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes lined every wall. A fire crackled merrily in a large carved stone fireplace, casting a warm, flickering glow on the room. In the center of the room, standing before the fire with his back to her, was a tall man holding a glass of what looked like whiskey. He turned slowly. It was him, Julian Deo. He looked exactly as he had in the photos online, but the images hadn't captured the sheer intensity of his presence. He had dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to see right through her, a strong jaw, and an air of coiled energy of a man accustomed to command. He was wearing a simple dark cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, casual attire that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. "Miss Vance," he said. His voice was deep and smooth with a quiet authority that filled the grand room. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to one of the plush leather armchairs arranged near the fire. Amelia perched on the edge of the seat, feeling like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a lion's den. Julian Deo didn't sit. He remained standing by the fire, studying her with an unnerving, analytical gaze. For a long moment, the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the frantic beating of her own heart. "My grandmother," he began, his voice cutting through the silence, "believes you are an angel?" Amelia shifted uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would have done." "No," he countered, his voice sharp and precise. "You did what very few people would have done. My security team pulled the surveillance footage from the cafe. I watched it. I saw the other customers ignore her. I saw your manager's contempt. I saw you spend nearly an hour of your time you were being paid for, to calm a frightened old woman." He took a step closer. "Then I had my team investigate further. I know you were fired, and I know why. I also know that the $12 you gave my grandmother for the taxi was likely the last of the cash you had on you. My grandmother is the matriarch of a family with a net worth that is difficult to comprehend. And today she was saved by the kindness of a waitress who gave her the last of her bus fare." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "What you might not know, Miss Vance, is that my grandmother has the early stages of Alzheimer's. Her memory comes and goes. She gets confused easily, especially in unfamiliar places. Her getting lost wasn't just an inconvenience, it was incredibly dangerous. You didn't just help a lost tourist, you may very well have saved her life." The revelation hit Amelia with surprising force. The situation was far more serious than she had imagined. Is she all right?" Amelia asked, her concern genuine. A flicker of warmth entered his eyes. "She is. She's resting upstairs. She was very tired, but she wouldn't rest until she knew I had found you. She made me promise." He finally moved from the fireplace and sat in the armchair opposite her, leaning forward, his gaze never leaving her face. The full force of his attention was overwhelming. "So, Amelia Vance," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I find myself in your debt, a debt I fully intend to repay, but a simple check feels insufficient. It would be a transaction, and what you did today was not transactional. It was human. So I have a proposition for you instead." Amelia stared at him, her mind a frantic scramble of confusion and adrenaline. A proposition. The word hung in the opulent air of the library, feeling both official and deeply ominous. She had braced herself for a perfunctory thank you, perhaps the offer of a cash reward that she would awkwardly accept. She had imagined a check being slid across a polished table, a sum that might keep the wolves from her door for a month or two. But the way Julian Deo was looking at her with that focused analytical intensity told her this was something else entirely. This wasn't a transaction, it was a reckoning. "I've had a rather productive few hours, Miss Vance," he began, his voice a low, controlled hum that seemed to absorb the sounds of the crackling fire. "When you're attempting to locate one person in a city of millions based on a first name and a description of a cafe uniform, you find that my organization can be exceptionally thorough. We learn a lot in a very short amount of time." He took a step away from the fire, moving into the center of the room. The maneuver subtly shifted the power dynamic, making her feel even more like a specimen under his microscope. "For instance, I know about the Bachelor of Arts in Art History from Northwood University. Graduated summa cum laude, a truly impressive achievement. I know about the scholarship year you spent in Lyon, which of course explains your impeccable colloquial French. My grandmother commented on it specifically. She said you spoke like the sun on the Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. This was a terrifying level of detail. He wasn't just a grateful grandson. He was a man who commanded an information emperor, and he had aimed it squarely at her. And he continued, his voice dropping a fraction, becoming more personal, more piercing. I know about your brother Leo. I know about his diagnosis, his treatment regimen, and the crushing, unconscionable cost of the medications required to keep him healthy. That was the blow that landed. It wasn't just an invasion of her privacy, it was an intrusion into the most sacred, painful part of her life, the fear and exhaustion she held at bay every single day. She felt her defenses crumble, a hot flush of shame and fear rising in her cheeks. He knew her deepest vulnerability. Your current circumstances, he stated, not with pity, but as a matter of fact, are a gross misuse of your potential. You possess a specialized education, a rare linguistic skill, and a demonstrable capacity for compassion. Yet you were serving coffee in an establishment where your manager values a clean saucer more than a person's well-being. The system that was meant to reward your intelligence and hard work has instead buried you in debt and forced you into a corner. I, on the other hand, have a problem. A problem that your unique and frankly overqualified skill set is perfectly, almost poetically suited to solve. He paused, letting her absorb the dizzying shift from her exposed past to his mysterious future. My grandmother, Genevieve, he said, his tone softening with genuine affection, requires a companion. Let me be very clear, not a nurse. She has a round-the-clock medical team, the best specialists money can buy. They monitor her health, they administer her medication. They are excellent at their jobs, but they are clinical. They do not feed her soul. He began to pace slowly before the fireplace. She needs someone who can converse with her in her native French about the art she loves, the poetry she remembers from her childhood. Someone to accompany her to museums and galleries, not to push her in a wheelchair, but to stand with her before a Monet and share in the wonder of it. She needs someone with the patience and compassion to be a calm harbor on the days when her memory is foggy. When the world becomes a confusing and frightening place, she needs a friend, a confidant, someone who sees Genevieve, the woman, not just the patient or the matriarch. He stopped his pacing and turned to face her directly, his dark eyes locking onto hers, holding her captive. She needs someone exactly like you, Amelia. The proposition laid bare was so audacious, so far beyond the realm of anything she could have conceived, that Amelia could only stare back in stunned silence. Her brain simply refused to process it. A waitress, a fired waitress. He wanted to hire her to be the companion to a billionaire's grandmother. But she finally stammered, the words feeling thick and clumsy in her mouth. I have no experience. I'm not a caregiver. I'm not qualified. I just work. I worked in a coffee shop. Your qualifications were on full display this afternoon, Julian countered instantly, his voice sharp and decisive, cutting through her self-doubt. Consider it the most unconventional job interview of your life. You were presented with a distressed, confused individual in a high-stress environment. You managed the situation with calm and empathy. You navigated a language barrier. You prioritized a human being's well-being over your own job security. You were resourceful, compassionate, and you acted with profound integrity. Those are not skills you list on a resume. Those are qualities of character. They are precisely the qualifications I am looking for. He walked over to a formidable mahogany desk in the corner of the library and picked up a single sheet of paper. The position naturally comes with compensation. Your starting salary would be $200,000 per year. The number was so astronomical it felt like a joke. It didn't even register as real money. It was a concept, a dream. Her mind tried to do the math, what it would mean for the bills, the debt Leo, and short-circuited. It is a live-in position, he continued as if discussing the weather. You would have a private suite of rooms in a separate wing of the estate. It has its own living area, kitchenette, and entrance. All meals, transportation, and other living expenses are, of course, covered. He was building a fantasy brick by gilded brick, but Amelia was still trapped in the foundation of her own reality. It was too much, too fast. There had to be a catch. He seemed to read her mind. He put the paper down and walked back towards her, his expression turning deadly serious. He had saved the most crucial piece for last. But none of that is the most important part of this offer, he said, his voice low and deliberate. My company, Devo Holdings, self-insures. We have one of the most comprehensive corporate healthcare plans in the world. It is a benefit I extend to all my personal staff and their immediate dependents. As my employee, your family would be covered. He let the words hang in the air. All of your brother's medical expenses, Amelia, his treatments, his prescriptions, any specialist he needs to see anywhere in the world, it will all be taken care of completely. There will be no more worrying about copays, no more fighting with insurance companies, and no more calls from the pharmacy. It will simply be handled. That was it. That was the moment the dam broke, the constant gnawing terror she had lived with for 3 years. The fear of a denied claim, of a missed payment of the day she couldn't afford the medicine that kept her brother alive. It didn't just lessen, it shattered. It evaporated. A weight so immense she hadn't realized its full crushing pressure was lifted from her soul in a single breathtaking instant. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, ragged sound she couldn't contain. Tears she hadn't known she was holding back began to stream down her face hot and fast. They were not tears of sadness or self-pity, but of overwhelming, earth-shattering relief. Through the blur, she whispered the one word that encapsulated all her disbelief. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse. "Why would you do all of this for me? I'm a complete stranger." Dr. Bonso. Julian Devo looked at her, and for the first time the intimidating billionaire facade fell away, completely revealing the fiercely protective grandson underneath, and a man who understood the currency of kindness in a world that seldom valued it. "In my world, Miss Vance, almost every interaction is transactional," he said, his voice now quiet and filled with a surprising sincerity. "People want something from me. My money, my influence, my time. It is a constant negotiation. Today, my grandmother was lost and terrified. She had nothing to offer anyone. She was, for all intents and purposes, invisible. But you saw her. You didn't ask what she could do for you. You didn't weigh the cost to your job. You simply saw another human being in distress, and you helped her. You treated her with dignity." He gestured around the magnificent silent room. "I can buy anything, Amelia, art, buildings, companies, but I cannot buy genuine selfless kindness. You gave that to my family freely, so this isn't charity. This is me paying a debt. And frankly, considering you may have saved the most important person in my life, I believe I'm getting the better end of the deal." He stood silently, giving her a moment. The choice was obvious. It wasn't a choice at all. It was a rescue, a new beginning, a miracle born from a cup of chamomile tea. Amelia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She rose to her feet, her legs feeling stronger and steadier than they had in years. She looked the most powerful man she had ever met directly in the eye, her own gaze clear and resolute. "I accept," she said, her voice unwavering. "Thank you. When do I start?" A genuine, brilliant smile transformed Julian Devo's face, reaching his eyes and erasing the last traces of his corporate armor. "Tomorrow," he said, extending a hand. "Welcome to the family, Amelia. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth is not defined by our bank account or our job title, but by the compassion we show to others." In her darkest hour, when she felt most invisible, a simple act of human kindness became a beacon that led her out of the storm. It shows us that you never ever know the impact a small gesture can have. The kindness you give away so freely might just be the one thing that comes back to save you. It's a testament to the idea that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, can sometimes lead to rewards beyond your wildest dreams. If this story inspired you or restored a little bit of your faith in humanity, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear a story of hope today. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. What's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for listening.